All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on Elastic's candidate experience best practices and STAR demo. So we have with us today Kristine Boccio, who's the recruiting operations manager for the Americas for Elastic. So Kristine, thank you so much for joining this webinar, and we're super excited. So we're going to have I'm going to have a conversation with Kristine on all things candidate experience and candidate experience feedback. And then after, my colleague Mo is going to give a demo of the STARD platform for those of you joining who are unfamiliar with it. You have on the right, you can have a questions area. So if you have any questions, you can leave them there. And we'll be taking some questions from the audience with Kristine at the end of our conversation. So Kristine, welcome.
Thank you.
First, I'm Marguerite, and I'm a customer success manager at STARD. So I've been working with Kristine for almost a year now in the team at Elastic. Kristine, so I guess first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your role at Elastic, and a little bit about Elastic as the company?
Sure. So as Marguerite mentioned, I am one of the recruiting operations managers for the EMEA region. I have a counterpart based out in EMEA. Between the two of us, our team essentially oversees the candidate's journey from interview scheduling up until onboarding, as well as any reporting needs and managing of new systems and tools such as STARD. So when we look at Elastic as a whole, we are a fully distributed company. We're spread across about 18 time zones, 30 plus countries. We have about 2,000 or so employees. And when we look at the structure, as I mentioned, you will see that we are a fully distributed and technology driven company. Primarily our employees do work from home, which does bring a delicate organizational structure with it as well. We thrive on a bottom-up communication, ownership, respect, and all this really enables our people to do their job in their best environment, which is truly important to us.
Cool. Yeah. And so can you maybe dive a little bit more into your PA team and how it's organized and how big it is? So yeah, it's obviously distributed across like so many time zones and regions, but how does that work?
Yeah, so our talent acquisition team is a global team. It consists of about 40 team members within recruiting operations, talent brand, and we're actually spread out across about 5 countries. And as I mentioned, we do recruit in a distributed environment, so we can hire almost anywhere, I will say. But we are spread out though across the globe.
Yeah. All right. And so candidate experience and experience feedback. So like when and why and how did you start to measure candidate experience within Elastic?
Yeah, so I mean, in recruiting, we're always looking at improving a candidate's experience. Candidates, they touch so many different touch points within the process, but us at Elastic, we never really had the right tools to help us track what that data looks like, the ability to really tell a story, to be transparent. We have received feedback in the past where, there were issues and we felt like we were failing candidates, when it came to their experience throughout the process. And we really wanted to make sure that we understood the why and we had the ability to dig a little bit further just to see how do we expand upon these issues? How do we bring some real solutions to the team? And that's when STARD came in and really helped us kind of drive what that looks like for us.
Yeah, awesome. And so now you've been using STARD for almost a year, and I think you had a good idea of the questions you wanted to ask yourself, I think, right? So you guys designed with your own questions. So how did you come up with the questions that you wanted to ask candidates?
Yeah, so as far as our questions, we had initially had a rejected and a hired survey set up previously. It was a very manual, tedious process. So kind of going into STARD, we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to utilize our previous questions and almost use them as a template, and then kind of look back at some of our comments that we received and From there, we really wanted to amend what we're asking candidates just to get a better full circle picture on how their experience was. We've actually gone through 3 phases, I call them, within STAR. So our initial phase was building out the initial rejected and hired surveys. Phase 2 was then looking into a hiring manager survey. So, when in terms of experience, it's important to understand that can mean for many different users, not just for candidates. And then finally, our 3rd phase is really focusing more on a global voice. Majority of our people actually sit in the US, and it's important that we have a global mindset. We need to be aware of the different cultures, and we need to make sure that we can relate to everyone, as best as we can. So as we're kind of going through, some of those changes, we just need to make sure that, we're just being consistent across the globe.
Yeah. And so that's sort of informing the questions that you're asking to candidates as well across all the regions.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so kind of going on that, is there any particular question or topic that's particularly what was or still is particularly interesting to you, like in the candidate experience?
Yes, so we actually have a block of questions that's tailored more so towards recruiting and the interview team. Those questions really just help us understand areas that we need to improve within our process. So, for example, one of the questions asks, how prepared were the interviewers? For us, that enables us to understand, did the interview team understand what their responsibilities are as an interviewer? Do they maybe require additional training? Were scorecards set up correctly? So it's sometimes it's the simple questions that allow us to tell a much bigger story that, it could maybe ask us or help us to look in other areas to just continue to improve what that process looks like, or that experience as well.
And also it sounds like really that you're able to sort of monitor your responsibilities, at least as a recruiting team, to kind of know, to make sure that you're kind of stepping up there.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to candidate experience, a lot of this is also accountability, just making sure that we're holding up our end of the bargain per se, to make sure that we're doing what we can to just provide candidates with top-notch experience, and just making sure that that's the same throughout various touch points, even those that are outside of recruiting as well.
Yeah. So so talking about the touch points, you have a couple stages. Can you just walk us through which stages you're asking for feedback on, which different touch points?
Yep. So we're actually measuring right now from our interviewing stages up until offer. The reason for doing this is at these stages, candidates are actually considered applicants, and they're going through our process. They're speaking with various team members. Again, it's not just recruiting. So it's important that we understand if other hiring teams are contributing to the candidate's journey, and what does that look like. When we look, I guess, into the future of START and the future of our surveys, I'm not sure if we're going to be adding new ones. It's always a possibility, right? I mean, candidate experience it's an evolving journey. We need to make sure that we're staying on top of what's happening. But for us, it's important to understand and really just focus on candidates that are deep within the process, having conversations with us, with hiring teams, and just making sure that, again, we're doing what we need to do to kind of bring them through and just provide that top-notch service.
Yeah. So for you, having hired candidates and then having candidates, feedback from candidates that are have had an interview and onwards, that's providing already a good overview for you from how you're doing, I think, right?
Exactly. I mean, if you look at candidates earlier in the stage, those that may have just applied but never spoken to anyone, it's not to say that their feedback is not just as important, but they may not be able to tell us the right story versus someone that might have actually went through the process and spoken to individuals. To us, that'll kind of open up our eyes to say, okay, maybe are there other areas that we need to look into a little bit further?
Yeah. And so you've been getting a lot of feedback from a lot of candidates. So Yeah, one of the things that everyone always wants to know is how do you follow up with candidates? So how do you follow up like to the candidates themselves with the feedback? So can you just share a little bit of how you at Elastic do that?
Sure. I mean, there are some cases. There are some cases where feedback might be delayed. Let's say coming from the hiring team. So, what we do within recruiting is we actually have sort of like pre-baked informational feedback that really keeps candidates engaged. And these could be like check-in emails. We have some that go into like an Elastic intro, so just more about like what we do. We talk about the story of search. There's a Someone Like Me and a culture blog, which if anyone's listening that hasn't had a chance yet to check those out, I would highly recommend to do so. It really, we hone in on things like equal pay blog and our benefits, and these are just our ways to ensure that candidates are staying engaged while we might be waiting on more specific feedback from the hiring teams. We also have recruiter best practices. And again, I know we talked about it earlier around accountability, but this allows us to actually stay accountable as a team, right? We want to make sure that we're following up when it's necessary. There might be some cases where we require an email. Other cases might be a phone call. It really just depends on how far along the candidate has gone within the process, but it's important that we outline what our best practices look like to make sure that the team is also doing the same on their end as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Great. And how about internally? So how is the feedback that you get from candidates shared internally? Like, do the recruiters have access to the system, or do you do that centrally?
Yep. So every recruiter actually has access to their own surveys. We want to be as transparent as possible when it comes to how they're doing, how candidates are surveying them. Primarily what ends up happening is the recruiting managers will utilize this information and talk about it during like one-on-ones or maybe like a quarterly review, monthly review. In addition to the actual access to the survey base, we also provide a monthly, what we call Feedback Friday newsletter, and it highlights both positive and negative. For us, transparency is key. We want to make sure that we're very open and honest as far as what's going on, areas that maybe we need to improve on, or areas that we have done really great in, and we want to praise, what that looks like for the team. In addition to that, the recruiting managers also share some of this information during QBRs, so they'll go back to their businesses and have those conversations. As I mentioned, a lot of the touch points that are happening for candidates are outside of just recruiting. So it's important that those businesses understand if there are anything or any issues or any improvements need to happen within the hiring teams, we need to start to have those conversations and just be transparent with, areas that maybe we need to continue to focus on going forward.
Yeah. No, so that I think that's exactly it. Like what I also say, like the recruiting, like as a recruitment team, of course you're responsible. You have so many dependencies also with the business, with the people that are interviewing, with people on how quickly they get feedback. So you really want to be transparent about that, so that you can work together as a team to make the experience for candidates really good.
Exactly. Open communication, I would say, is key within processes like this, and just really understanding if there are any direct impacts on the experience and just having those conversations.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we were wondering what was the most insightful feedback you ever received? So was there something that came in that you were really like, wow, this is great, we really can do something with this.
Yeah, so it's no secret we're in a global pandemic. These are uncharted waters for pretty much all of us. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, Elastic is also going through a headcount freeze. So while we're kind of going through all these, areas that maybe we're not used to, it was actually really refreshing to see candidates that did not make it through the process. So these are candidates that we rejected, and they're still providing positive feedback. They're still praising our products, our culture, our overall recruiting experience. To me, that shows that the recruiters, they're a team of professionals. They understand that these are difficult times. We have billions of people who lost their jobs due to COVID, and we want to make sure that we're treating all the applicants fairly. And it's important that we're communicating that, as much as possible during the interview process, and just really being honest with the feedback. the fact that Elastic has been transparent, just regarding things like that, I think that's just a testament to all culture and values. And we can see it in candidates, and they appreciate that honesty as they're kind of going through the process.
Yeah, no, I think that's really useful also for, like, because I've been getting a lot of questions, from other clients, like, what can we do? There's so many people looking for a job right now, and people are getting, frustrated if they don't hear back. And yeah, so I think exactly just like communicating and being really transparent about what the company is going through right now, and like what the process looks like, how long it's going to take. So yeah, super useful. Yeah, and so how or have you noticed an improvement in your candidate experience since you really started focusing and working on it?
With Starred, one of the things that I love is the insights that we get around the free text comments. One of the things that we've also noticed is that majority of our rejected candidates are actually promoters, which is awesome. Many of the comments, that we'll see, they still hope to work with us in the future. They're satisfied with how they were notified of not moving forward, and even just the quality of their feedback. Again, the fact that recruiters can utilize this information, they can bring it back to the hiring teams and just really highlight areas that we may need to improve on. I think for us, a lot of it is just the insight and being able to see very easily, what's going on, what are some of the comments that individuals are sharing with us. But for us, I think the biggest piece is just realizing that even those that may not move forward in the process are still leaving with a positive experience, and that's important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, and so we talked about this. You talked about this a little bit before, but in what way do you think it's had an effect on the recruiters or on your recruitment team? Just seeing that, getting that feedback, and seeing it, has it changed? Do you think the way they work or the way they deal with candidates?
I don't know if I would say anything has changed. I think, especially after talking with some of the recruiters, first and foremost, it holds the team accountable, right? It allows them to be talent advisors. They're able to have growth and strategic conversations with their teams. Experience overall is actually one of our pillars within recruitment. So again, we not only focus on the candidates, but we also need to focus on hiring managers and fellow employees, and just being able to provide a tool to recruiters that allows them to dig a little bit further into their hiring teams, I think is crucial. It's valuable, insightful information that they need to see. And the feedback, again, the feedback's valuable. It ensures that we're not hiring without bias. We're just continuing to provide just great experiences for even our future candidates.
Yeah. And so, okay, well, some last questions. What do you advise to businesses who don't measure candidate experience? So what would you, obviously you do it and you're doing a great job at it, I think. But so what do you think is the most important thing to actually measure candidate experience?
My advice, I guess my first question would ask them, why wouldn't you want to measure candidate experience? Candidate experience, overall, right? We all know it has such an impact on our business. It's become more important to track and measure just the full experience, just so that we can learn what adjustments need to be made and just ensure that you're not losing out on top talent. I think that happens more so than maybe we're aware of. And I think that a lot of that can go back to maybe a simple process change that we weren't aware of without receiving some of that feedback back from the candidates.
Yeah. Okay, and do you have any top recommendation for companies that already do measure candidate experience, to bring it to the next level and really improve their scores and response rates? What would you advise?
I would definitely say set up metrics. You want to make sure that the team is on the same page as far as where you want to grow. Really just setting in place what your ideal NPS score is going to look like. Also, I would say take candidates' feedback very seriously. Look at what they want, what went wrong, but also what went right. That those positive experiences are just as important as the negative, and they can really help educate the teams. And I know I touched on it earlier, but even having a global voice, I think it's extremely important, especially in global companies, that we're very just conscious of the different cultures, and we're making sure that the types of questions that we're asking, does it make sense? Are we actually getting the type of data that we want to see? And is it allowing us to improve what our experience looks like overall? So I would definitely say as long as you have your metrics in place and the team's on board and you're consistent on the global level, I could definitely say it'll be successful for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. So much insightful stuff, I think. So just going to see what kind of questions there are. Okay, so Zasu asked, could you share some culture blogs? And I think someone from Elastic already did. So thanks a lot for that. So in the chat is a link to Elastic's culture blogs that Kristine was mentioning earlier. So that would be definitely useful. Let's see. Okay, so Jasper asks, have you seen that feedback actually helps improve your candidates' experiences?
Yes. I mean, from when we first started our journey, I believe our rejected scores were about 14. And then looking at where we're at now, we're about 25. To me, I mean, especially for a rejected candidate, right, you already know they're kind of going into the survey, maybe a little resentful, they didn't get the role. So, you're always a little hesitant to kind of find out what sort of feedback they're going to provide. But the fact that, again, even majority of our rejected candidates are considered promoters, that overall, I feel like just speaks volumes to the fact that we're improving. Yes, we still have a ways to go, but the effort and the work that the team is doing, it's obviously in the right direction. And we just need to kind of keep with that mindset and continue to look at other ways that we can improve what that looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And let's see, Monica has a couple of questions. So first of all, which ATS are you using?
We actually use Greenhouse. Yeah. And it's a very easy integration, I will say. I personally did it with Marguerite. So if I can do it, you can do it. But yes, very easy integration though.
Yeah. Awesome. And do you survey the hiring team following the interview process to measure their experience?
So we don't survey the hiring team, but we do survey the hiring manager to get an understanding of, how did the overall process take place? Because at the end of the day, it's a partnership between the hiring manager and the recruiter. And we wanted to make sure that the type of data that we're capturing, we're emphasizing that it takes two of us to kind of go through this, right? It's not just recruiting. And I think that's really important to stress because there are various touch points and there are other team members that are speaking with these candidates and providing an experience with them. So a lot of that is just understanding, did we do what we were supposed to do? Did we outline what the role requirements were? Did we ask the right questions? Was the hiring team on the same page? So we look at it from that lens as more of a partnership between the two of us.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay, and then another question from Monica. Who is responsible for pulling the data weekly for the Feedback Friday newsletters? Yes, so who does that?
Yep, so we actually have two of our senior recruiting coordinators. They pull it on the monthly basis. And again, it's just a highlight to share. This is sort of where we were over the past month, positive, negative comments. We also track some trends, right? So we're just taking a look to see, are we seeing consistent comments in a certain area, or do we see positive comments in a certain area, right? So again, it's just kind of sharing with the team, this is what's been happening and ways that we need to continue to improve upon that going forward.
And that goes out to the whole recruiting team.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's an interesting question. How do you interpret data if you receive it in all languages? Is it all in English, or if you have different languages, does it get translated?
So everything's in English. The survey gets sent out in English, and as candidates are responding back. So that's our primary language within the tool. Yeah.
And you have to, so since you're distributed, I assume you require everyone has to speak English to even apply.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes that easy. All right. Last chance for questions for Kristine. Okay. Oh, one more question. Is sending surveys automated to hiring managers?
Yes. So all the surveys we have set up are automated. We have it built in within STAR, sort of like a trigger point. So the hiring manager surveys will essentially go out once we have marked a candidate hired. So this way we can get the hiring manager's feedback as close to real time as possible, right? They just officially filled their rec. Let us know how we did. Let us know how can we improve upon this, what needs to, any change that needs to be made, let's say, going forward. But everything is automated within the both systems, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for your questions, everyone. I think that was a good, definitely valuable addition. Yeah, Kristine, thank you so much. This has been really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And if
Yeah.
there are any other questions that we didn't get to, I know Marguerite will go ahead and send those over to me, and I'll make sure I get answers out to everybody as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you so much. So please stick around, everyone, because for those of you who aren't familiar with STARD, my colleague Mo is going to jump on and give you a platform demo right now. So yeah, let me see. Where is Mo? Hey Mo. So yeah, so we're gonna leave and let Mo do his thing. So yeah, Kristine, thank you so much again.
I appreciate that. It was really insightful. Yeah, so it looks like it's just me left, guys. So a warm welcome. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Kristine, and thank you, Marguerite. Everything you said, resonated, I'm sure, with a lot of the people that are listening and watching. I'm going to take you through the nitty gritty of stuff. So hopefully you can see an email invite. That's already. And so I guess response rates is something that we truly focus on at Start, because you want to be able to change all those opinions and turn them into insights that then your organization could use to make those improvements that were already mentioned. So if we take a look at the email invite itself, what you'll see in this case is it's in the look and feel of Start. Now, of course, this can be changed, so that's in the look and feel of your organization. So as soon as the candidate receives this, they feel like, okay, I need to take the time to go through this invite. Now, if we go through the actual email messaging here, now you don't want to be doing this manually all the time. So this is where the automation and integrations come into play. So Kristine did mention that they were on Greenhouse. I know a lot of different people are on using smart recruiters and other ATSs, but what we do at Start is we automate into your systems. And so the reason this is important is if I show you on this page here, what we can do is we can pull different fields and different tags into the email. So here we can see it says, "Hi, John, thank you for your application for the role of product owner here at our Amsterdam office." And so at first name, at role, and at city are just an example of what you can pull in so that it's automated. And I guess the positive thing about this is as soon as the candidate receives it, it's personalized. It reaches out to them because we know what region they've applied for and also for what job role. And so they're much more likely going to answer the feedback survey because it's very personal to them. It's not just a generic survey invite sent out. And then finally, the last thing I want to take your attention to in the email is the NPS question. So we have a standard NPS question, and it's included in the email invite, and there's a reason for this. And that reason actually is, if we had it so it just said click to start survey, we get sort of lots of drop-offs. But the minute you have your NPS question in the email invite itself, and I go ahead and I click a score, so I'll go ahead and be very positive. I've clicked a 9. What you'll see is that 9 is logged. So you always have access to that as a benchmark. So later on, when you are analyzing this, what you can see is that you've received a score of 9. Now, I'm going to go ahead and fill out the survey. What you can see here is we can process the feedback anonymously. Now, again, it's really up to you how you process that feedback. In some cases, you can tick it. We actually advise for the candidate experience, it's probably not best practice to tick it because what you want to do is you want to start to them. And if they gave you a really low score as a candidate, you want to say, sorry, what was the problem? And also, understand why they gave you that low score. And if it's anonymous, you will never be able to close that loop. So what I'll do is as I go through the survey, what you'll notice is that there are different question types. So here we've got starred questions, but you're also able to give feedback. So I can always type in any optional answers that I want to put in there. Now, another thing you'll notice with our surveys is that I'm able to click next without having to answer every single question. And the reason for that being is one of our philosophies is that some feedback is better than no feedback. We want to be able to give the candidate that space to answer what is truly important to them. And we believe that that gives you the best feedback. So as Kristine mentioned earlier, the reason why we still have rejected candidates who in some cases might not, want to give feedback, but in other cases they do. And so their NPS score is still high and they could always recommend you. So it's always about caring about the candidate, starting with the human and making sure that, you respect certain elements when giving them surveys. And obviously you don't want to cause survey fatigue. Now, I'm going to go ahead and submit this survey. And what you'll see is it takes you to this thank you page, where on this thank you page, it's saying, please write a review. Now, in the case that I scored it negatively, so I'm going to go back for a second and I'm going to say, you deserve a 2. I didn't think it was a great experience. I thought it was really bad. What's going to happen is I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to click submit. So it's a completely different thank you page. And so the difference here is that with this thank you page, it picks up in the system that we scored a low NPS, and a firefight alert is sent out to whoever is in charge of looking after negative feedback, saying, Mohammed gave you really low negative feedback. Please get back to him or her. Just make sure, that we can resolve this issue. Whereas in the case that I scored a 9, it's saying, okay, why don't you take me to your review platform? So depending on what certain review platforms you might use, you could always leave a link. So for your promoters, what we want to do is we want to promote them to your online review sites. And then for your detractors, what we want to say is use this time to vent, let us know what we did wrong. And then we're going to make those improvements at home. So that's the front end of the survey. I'm going to take you guys through the back end of this. I quickly want to start off by showing you this overview. Overview is where you're able to see your scores, and you can always benchmark organization. So we have different touch points. So you can always, after assessment, after application, or after interview, depending on what you want to measure with your candidate experience, you can include that and start off by measuring, and you're able to see what your NPS might be. So here, as an example, we've got a -17 for the hiring manager NPS. Now, of course, if we deep dive into that, we can understand how we're going to make those improvements. But this is always good because you're able to see your data versus the benchmark data, and you can make those comparisons. So, for example, if you wanted to do comparisons versus EMEA versus the Americas, you can do so, different regions depending on where you are. That is also something you can find out. Now, on building out the forms, it's very, very simple to do. There are 2 things you can do. So the first is you can go into our template gallery. This is probably the easiest thing, which is just picking out a ready survey that's benchmarked. So I'm going to go ahead and use new hire candidate, which is short. So it shows you that it's 2 questions and 20 seconds to complete. So if we preview this form, we're able to see what are the questions that are being asked. So first question might be, how satisfied were you with the overall recruitment process? And then, of course, the question in there. And then lastly, a recommendation. So based on your application, how likely is it that you would recommend us to a friend or acquaintance? So this is just an NPS question. Now you're able to view it all on one page or on the mobile, because we are mobile first and we understand that people do use their mobiles to open emails. So it's always good to make sure that we can make that fit in there as well. Now, this is something you can add directly to your account, really, really simple. In the case that you wanted to have your own questions, that is also something that you can do. So if you wanted to customize your own questions and upload it to Starred, I can show you how to do that. Very, very simple. And so we go ahead, and if we wanted to, we'll take this as an example because we were working on rejection after interview. What we can see is we've got different blocks here. And what we can do is, if I click on this, I could always change the type of questions that I want to ask. And so I can add different question types and use, for example, yes and no, not applicable, graded questions, multiple choice questions, and also open-ended questions. And you can always click and then edit the question so that you can decide what it is that you want to choose. And of course, once you save those changes, that form will appear. Now, if I go into Connect, so Start Connect is our platform where you're able to then make that integration. So I know obviously a lot of you logging on are on Greenhouse, but there are others that are on Smart Recruiters and different ATSs. If I use Greenhouse as an example, you'll be able to see exactly what touch points that you can send out surveys for, because the technology works, it's all pretty much the same. So if we use the journey type candidate hired, I'll go ahead and click edit. In this case, the ATS is our trigger. So if I edit that workflow, you can see we're choosing our trigger is candidate. When the candidate send the email, send an email out, which of course includes our survey. You could always add optional conditions. So here we can see that there's different fields, of course, from that relevant ATS. But what you want to do also, you can change different features. So here, let's say a candidate was rejected and you don't want to send them straight away. What you can do is delay that. And so we've got delays. So all the way up to 30 days. Now, of course, you might just want to use it as days and schedule that invite. We can, of course, choose the feedback form that we want to send out with that specific email invite, and of course, the language. So in many cases, we're selecting language and it's usually going to be in English. However, if you have other languages, this is something that the system can pick up so that you will always send out a survey to that office or that region in their language, so that it wouldn't be a problem. And so as soon as they receive it, they feel that they can fill that out. And so you've got other recipient settings such as first name, last name, and email, and any custom field. So you can include within the email invite itself who the recruiter was. And that's something that just makes it even more personalized, such as, hi, Mohammed, we know you spoke with so-and-so, so you can include the recruiter name. And that just means that you've built rapport with that person and you can remember to fill the survey in for them. And we can always set a reminder as well. So in the case that the person hasn't filled out, the candidate hasn't filled out the email invite, then after 7 days, we can send them a second reminder. Now, that's how the workflows would work. Depending on what ATS you are, it does change slightly, but the majority of the time, the technology remains the same. Now, if we want to look at the actual insights, now we have two different types. So we have our standard dashboards and also our bespoke dashboards. If I start off by showing you the standard dashboards, you'll be able to view exactly how you can make those improvements by looking at start. So this could be an example. So rejected after interview. Of course, everything that you see here is just dummy data, but what we can do is deep dive and understand, okay, why have we got a score of Nps 16? And here what we can see is our positive comments and also our negative comments or passive comments. And what we can do is click in to see how that candidate responded to the survey. But also any one-off properties from the ATS. That way we know exactly what department they were in, who the recruiter was and the hiring manager, etc. And the great thing about this is you can always send them an email directly from the Start platform. And sort of this plays into that piece of making sure that you close that feedback loop and you get back to them so that the candidate feels like their issues, or if they had any issues, were taken care of. Now, in terms of comparisons for the standard dashboards, what you're able to see is we can take, as an example, different groups. And so You obviously have the ability to customize what groups you want to see. In this case, we're looking at department, location, and recruiter. And if we were to take everyone versus, let's say, recruiter James, what we can do is make those comparisons. And so this is great for one-to-one purposes or managerial purposes, where you can sit down with your recruiters just to see, okay, where are their strengths, where are their weaknesses, and how can we get them to improve? And so here we can see that the overall experience might be a bit lower compared to the benchmark, but that's okay, because then what we can do is we can see from the comments exactly what it is that we can do to make those improvements. And again, you could always just click on to see the responses, exactly what was left in there. So of course, there's no comments in this group that are available, but if there are any comments, they will populate out. And our priority matrix. So this is actually really important. And the reason for that being is because this shows you that correlation between all of the questions in your survey against your Net Promoter Score. So that was the very first question that we asked in the email invite. And so here it's the areas in green shows you the areas that you're doing really well in. The areas in red are the areas you need to improve. And then of course you've got the areas you can monitor and maintain. Now the important part here is that you want to focus on the area in red. So what we're saying is, if we are better at preparing for interviews, we're going to see the highest impact on our Net Promoter Score. And so if that was something we wanted to focus on Q2, we would see that increasing over in Q3. And what we can see is, if there are any comments or anything that was left over, exactly how we might be faring, but also how did we do in terms of the NPS. So from February all the way to July, were there any upticks? What was the general trend? And if this has comments linked to it, that's great for groups, for TA teams to analyze and understand, okay, this is where we maybe need to improve and focus our time on. So it's always good at sort of compartmentalizing things and making you have different priorities. That's the standard dashboards. Now I'm going to show you our bespoke dashboards really quickly. And so this is where you're able to compare more groups. So in the standard dashboards, you saw that I can compare group A and group B. Here you have much more comparison. So you can go really granular by going through department, by a country, job post sourcing, and application status. And so depending on what you can see, you can sort of chop and change. So as response rates, we can see overall our response rates. And so different things you might want to see are your candidate journey funnel. So we can see here how disqualified an application all the way to high it is, but also our application response times per quarter. And so again, this is something that you can add on as you go, as you sort of make your candidate experience better. You could always say, I want to see posting source. Where are we getting the most responses from? And a great example could be the satisfaction map as well. So you can see not just Europe, but if you wanted and you had offices across the world, you could have a world view and understand, okay, how does our satisfaction score around different parts of the world, and what is it that we can do to make it better? So if, for example, one region wasn't doing so well, you could, of course, always go in and see what their comments are. And so if I click on here, this is dynamic, so everything should change. So the NPS by department here should change to match that region. So I'll let that change. Like magic, it changes. And we can see, of course, filtering on different departments. So, of course, everything else in this dashboard will filter to change as well. So, yeah, that's sort of a very high-level overview of STARD with our dashboards. Now, the last thing I want to show you is our STARD Recruiter Performance Matrix. Now, what you can do, of course, this is just dummy data, but what you can do is you can set it so you can see, okay, who's the best performing recruiter all the way to worst performing. And this isn't so that it's sort of, you know, you're making everyone compete against each other. It's just so that you can see who can improve and who can they learn from. And at the same time with STARD, you have different data access policies. So it's not that everyone is able to see, okay, where am I on this list? It's just so that management can see, okay, who is doing well, who do we need to have coach who, and so you can only see your scores. If you wanted to set it up so that the recruiter could only see their scores, that is also possible as well. So this is a fairly good add-on for the Start Recruiter Performance Matrix, I would say. But yeah, so that's Start in a nutshell. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, of course, you can send me an email, and that I'll be typing in the chat function here. If you wanted to request a demo, that's something you can also do. But what I would suggest is probably try Start for free. At the moment, what we're doing is we're offering a rejected after interview, that journey type for free. So you can create an account, just go on the website, create an account, and just get started with that single journey type. See how it goes. And then if you wanted to sort of expand upon that, that's something we could always have a conversation on. But yeah, as I said, thank you so much for joining, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. Sorry, I was just seeing if you guys could hear me. Thank you all again for listening. That is the end of this webinar. Thanks again so much to Kristine Boccio from Elastic. And thank you, Mo. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you and talking to you all soon. Have a great day or evening wherever you are. And yeah, see you soon.